She said to her sister on speakerphone, "I deserve everything he owns. The car, the condo, the savings, everything. Without me, he'd be nothing." I was in the next room pretending to work, the laptop open and the cursor blinking like a metronome, while her voice carried through the thin apartment walls and settled into a kind of cold clarity I couldn't unhear. And for a long, long breath I did nothing but listen and let each word find its place in my head, because there are moments you hear the truth of someone and nothing dramatic happens. You just rearrange your life quietly to match the new facts. She laughed after the sentence, light and sure, like she was rehearsing the future as if ownership were a simple noun you could assign by insisting on it. And her sister's muffled voice answered with the kind of congratulatory noise you make when everything in your social life confirms your thesis. I stayed still on purpose. Confrontation felt useless with a person who already declared your worth aloud. The condo was in my name, bought 2 years before our wedding with cold, careful money from long hours and small sacrifices that nobody saw because she liked to tell people we bought it. And it occurred to me then that narrative is often more persuasive to friends than receipts, and that people who conflate contribution with entitlement rarely notice the documents that separate one from the other. The car was mine too, paid off before she ever met me, the keys in a drawer labeled with my name, and a small dent in the bumper from a night of rain where no one blamed her because she didn't exist in the memory of that empty road. I let her believe the story she wanted, because for a long time doing so kept the peace. I made coffee in the mornings. I fixed the leaky faucet. I pretended that partnership meant apologizing first and never tallying the little debts of affection. But hearing her say, "I deserve everything," changed the math. It didn't make me furious so much as resolute. You learn in adulthood that pride can be dismantled with paperwork and patience more effectively than with anger and spectacle. That night, after she finished the call, I walked out into the street and did not shout or throw things. I walked until the city noise became a metronome, and the old hurt receded enough for a plan to form. I called Helena that evening, old friend, a lawyer who knows how to keep things clean, and told her, "She just said she expects it all." She gave me a single, level sentence. "Then make a legal life that matches what is actually yours." We started by cataloging, not by hiding. I gathered title deeds, receipts, account statements, every electronic trail of money and intention, and made photocopies and timestamps and stored them in places designed for evidence rather than drama. I redirected my paycheck into a new account in my name, left just enough in the joint account for bills, and set alerts on my credit. I did the small things that add up to legal armor. Nothing dramatic, nothing secretive in the criminal sense. I was not inventing shells. I was protecting the factual record of what pre-existed her claim. She continued in the days after, to decorate and to narrate. She posted filter-smooth photos of brunches and wrote about renovation ideas in the tone of someone who expected their imagined future to be as solid as architecture. She told friends in conversation and in texts that she'd modernize the kitchen when we split. And the casualness of that sentence is the thing that bruised the most, because it treated our life like an exhibit on a table to be rearranged by whoever claimed to own the catalog. I remember finding her laptop open on the counter one afternoon, steam from a kettle curling in the air, and reading a draft email she never sent to her lawyer outlining the assets she intended to claim. The condo, the car, even my father's watch that hangs in my drawer, all listed with a sort of clinical entitlement as if affection is a currency. I closed the laptop and felt nothing dramatic. Only a slow, legal-minded conviction, settling like dust. The next morning Helena filed, quietly, and I went to work as if nothing had happened, because I had learned by then that calm is stronger than righteous performance. 2 days after the filing, she confronted me in the kitchen, papers in hand and face pale, in that way people look when a rehearsal is interrupted by a real script. "You filed for divorce," she said, as if it were an accusation. "You were going to," I answered, "so I saved you the trouble." Her voice wavered between outrage and bewilderment. "You can't just do that," she said. And when I told her exactly what she had said on the phone, she went through the stages of denial so predictably I could have worn a coat of sarcasm through the motions. "I didn't mean it," she mouthed, the old manipulative cadence sliding out, apology practiced and then supplanted by rage. She accused me of privacy invasion, of cruelty, of wanting to hurt her. I told her the truth. You told your sister you deserved everything. I heard it. I reacted to words, not to secrets. She slapped me once, as if the act might reset the fabric of her sense of control, and then she cried in that immediate, performative way that people use when guilt fails and they need pity as a patch. I left that night with a suitcase and a clarity I had never felt in the wrecked middle of a marriage. The legal world is patient. It waits for documents, not storms. Helena sent disclosures to her lawyer that were so precise they could be read as a ledger of fact, not a manifesto of spite. The condo's deed was stamped in old. The car's title predated our vows. The trust my parents had set up years before, intended to shelter generational things from exactly such casual entitlement, was documented in calm, thick pages. Her lawyer called and demanded more, implying fraud and concealment, the old tactic that mistakes volume for substance. At the hearing, the judge read the trust documents and sighed with the fatigue of someone who'd seen many narratives collapse under the weight of clear dates and signatures. The motion alleging concealment was dismissed, and the only sound in the room was the rustle of papers as law got on with its job. She cried afterward in the hallway, and her counsel looked as if they'd swallowed broken glass. It changed nothing in the ledger of property, but it shifted her social currency toward the side where sympathy becomes thin and costly. In the weeks that followed, she attempted the usual war of attrition, appearing at the condo uninvited, posting insinuating things to mutual friends, forwarding stories of cruelty to social feeds as if narrative scarcity would force a different legal reality. I documented everything, texts, shaky videos, timestamps, and passed them to Helena like puzzle pieces that only made sense under a calm, rational light. When she arrived at the lake house my parents keep and tried to direct movers, my father recorded her smashing a lamp, evidence that was both petty and damning. And when Helena sent that footage to the opposing counsel, it was not vengeance. It was simply truth with a timestamp. The lawyers on the other side threatened sanctions, threatened countersuits, tried to weaponize emotion as if anger could substitute for law. But law, in its own indifferent way, prefers to weigh documents instead of drama. The settlement negotiations were a parade of diminishing returns for her. Each new attorney left a patient trail of exhausted emails and explained to their client that the law does not equate theater with entitlement. When the judge finally signed the decree, it read like a ledger concluding a decade-long account. She took her car and half the joint savings and little else, no alimony, no claim on the trust, no equity in the condo. My victory, if one could call it that, felt more like a reclamation of air than of assets. I repainted the living room in colors she had never liked. I replaced the curtains with plain ones that do not announce taste, and I returned to routines that had been small, steady things before the marriage turned into a set of demands. People asked me later if I felt empty. For a while there was a hollow where habit used to be, but the hollowness was not grief for what we had. It was relief from the currency of negotiation that had become our domestic life. Friends came back, tentative at first because she had been so good at making people take sides, the kind of social triangulation that feels like pressure on your chest until someone removes the weight. One night at a bar, an old friend said quietly, "She told everyone you'd fall apart." And I laughed softly, not out of cruelty but from recognition of the absurdity. She was half right, I said. I did break, but not into pieces for her to collect. I broke away. Time heals by attrition more than by medicine. The small domestic rituals rebuilt me. Coffee poured without permission, music played at the wrong time of night, a couch assembled without discussion. The condo ceased to be a stage and became again a place to live. I saw, however, the larger lesson. Entitlement operates like a fungus. It colonizes narratives and then insists that the narrative is the real. People will sometimes tell themselves that the act of caretaking creates proprietary rights, that the labor of emotional management can be converted into title. Sometimes courts agree that contributions complicate division, but they require proof and documentation, not postures and pithy phone calls. She believed she had ownership because she repeated the story often and loudly enough that friends thought it plausible. What she did not have was history and signature and prior purchase. She did not understand that love is not a deed and affection is not a title. I hold no animus now beyond a sober regret that she learned her lessons the public way. She moved on with a man who flips houses and posted to her sister about how she was starting anew with the kind of optimism that reads like an advertisement for denial. Perhaps she'll get all she chases in the future because the world sometimes rewards relentless belief more than it rewards accuracy. Perhaps not. I stopped following the update feeds because my life no longer needed the narrative scaffolding of her versus me. The last line of the divorce decree sits in a drawer with a certificate of my father's trust. Both documents equally banal and equally freeing. They are not trophies. They are instruments. If anything, what I kept by the end of it was not merely property, but the fact of my own boundaries, that I would not be auctioned off in conversation, that my efforts were not currency to be spent by someone who felt entitled to withdraw them for display. Love reduced to ledger will always fail because the ledger requires receipts. She said to her sister she deserved everything I owned, and in a literal, humiliating way she was right. She got everything she had a legal claim to and nothing of what she wanted when she attempted to impose narrative over documented truth. The quietest revenge is often the most effective. To refuse the performance she expected, to answer gaslight with documentation, entitlement with patience, and to live again in the small, ordinary freedoms she mistook for weakness. Some nights I still think of that phone call, and I realize the greatest cruelty in her words was not the greed, but the honesty, because she revealed in a sentence how little she conceived of me as a person rather than an asset. It taught me something essential about people who claim the moral high ground while holding the lowest standards of reciprocity. I do not rejoice in her loss. I do not seek to gloat. I simply enjoy the slow, deliberate peace of a life unmonitored by someone else's ledger. If she ever tells her sister again that she deserves everything a man owns, perhaps this time she will remember the time a judge read dates and signatures and found her desire insufficient. Perhaps she will not. The world is indifferent and sometimes merciless, and often quietly fair when the facts are in order. I kept what was mine not out of spite, but out of a sense of restitution for ordinary decency. She lost what she thought she could claim because entitlement lacks the patience to build anything that can survive scrutiny. In the end, the condo stands, the morning light touches the window, the coffee steams, and I turn the key without having to ask permission.